So next, we'd like to welcome to the stage Brittany Jones, a lead product manager here at ThoughtWorks. And while XConf is a conference for technologists and by technologists, we've decided to let Brittany share her wisdom today because she's had quite a bit of experience in what we call technical product management, the idea of building products for developers or for technical users. The topic today is one that affects all of us, which is how to fix a failed discovery. So Brittany, please welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Brandon. As Brandon said, my name is Brittany Jones. I'm excited to be here. I'm a technical product manager in addition to a product manager, and I look forward to chatting with you all today about how to fix a failed discovery. So look, I'm gonna just go ahead and spoil it for everybody here. The easiest, simplest way to fix a failed discovery is simply to just have a product manager or a technical product manager present during the discovery. Shocker, right? But just in case I don't have you all convinced quite yet, I've prepared 3 different case studies to talk about 3 different organizations that I've had experience with over my decade of experience here in product management. The question here is what went wrong during these discoveries. So for the first discovery, we have a new streaming application. So the CTO of the organization decided, hey, let's go ahead and build a new streaming application. Customers were previously using a REST-based API, and they were hitting the API, several times, if not tens of times per second. In addition to that, they were receiving small kind of bite-sized pieces of information. So naturally, it made sense to transition to a streaming API. Now, one thing to note with this particular case study and organization, a product person was not consulted during the discovery process. It made sense to just go on with it, and so that's what they did. Second case study that we have, the product vision was highly documented, lots of slideware, lots of things, clear vision in terms of what we needed to build and the roadmap and how we were going to go ahead and build that. However, when you started to get into a little bit of the details, you realized that the interviews and kind of customer user feedback sessions, they had confirmation bias. And so, as you can imagine, some of the impacts of that, which we'll get to a little bit later. And then last but not least, with our third case study, the discovery went generally well. Our client was happy. The team was generally happy. We created some of our post-discovery artifacts, right? However, the product vision and some of the scope, none of it was documented, although the main stakeholder knew everything that needed to be done for the product. So it seemed like it was okay. So let's talk about what went wrong during this discovery. Everything's been built, deployed, and how was it received? Well, for the first case study that I talked about, as it turns out, with the industry that the customer base was in, they were not a tech-forward organization. In fact, they were laggers in tech. And so even though the streaming API was the ideal technical solution, it made sense from all parties and all perspectives, it's just not what the customers wanted. They weren't ready to adopt that technology. And so as a result of it, they ended up not adopting the streaming API. And unfortunately, that was 2 years of development work that was completely wasted. The next case study, while the product vision was really strong, as it turns out that confirmation bias came to kind of bite us in the behind. And so what ended up happening was while the solution that we created was generally a great solution, customers already had an alternative solution. And so it was nice, but they already had an alternative. So when it came to adoption, customer adoption was very low. And as a result, the team became frustrated because at the end of the day, no one wants to build something that's not going to have an impact, right? That people aren't going to adopt. And then last but not least, when it came time for development, turned out to be a lot of scope creep because a lot of that scope wasn't defined kind of at the beginning. The product requirements were oftentimes undefined, and that led to team morale being low in addition to the client morale being low. So this kind of ties in with the spoiler a little bit earlier, but just in case you are still unsure what may have gone wrong with these product discoveries, there was not a product manager nor a technical product manager present during the discovery. Crazy, particularly from my perspective. But unfortunately, this is something that I'm seeing more and more common, especially when it comes to technical products, right? Which Brandon reminded us are oftentimes products where the end user is a developer. And so what I'm here to tell you today, and the key takeaway from all of this conversation, is that product and tech go together like peanut butter and jelly. I'm telling you, the classic sandwich here. And so how product functions is not only are we working with tech to define the product, right? But then we're also connecting our product and our tech to our business in addition to our customers. So your business and your customers kind of function as your bread. And then you have product and tech in the middle. That's your main sandwich. And together we make a delightful meal. So the biggest thing that I kind of want to take away from this particular slide is that when you don't have a technical product manager or a product manager present, you risk not having a product at all. In fact, it can oftentimes be a really expensive glorified hackathon. Now, obviously, that's not something that we want, but that's why it's really important to have all parties kind of present and at the table, right? So that we can make something that's truly going to be impactful. Another thing is peanut butter can't be jelly and jelly can't be peanut butter. You need both. Like I said, I have over a decade of experience in product management and I'm still learning things every day. And trust and believe, I work 100% of the time. I work full days just like all of us do. And so as you can imagine, it's not something that someone can easily do 100% of their time while also doing something else. So again, the main takeaway here is that we really, really, really work best together to make that, classic sandwich there. So you might be saying, okay, cool, Brittany, that's all nice and stuff, but what do you guys actually do during the discovery process? Well, happy to tell you, of course. First thing we do is we ask tons of questions. And when I say tons, I mean literally a ton. You may have heard the common phrase that says the best way to learn something is to teach it to somebody else, right? So in this case, your client or your sponsor or your CTO, your your CEO in some cases, but the person who has that product vision, that's going to be your teacher. And as a product manager or as a technical product manager, you're going to be the student. And so you're constantly asking that individuals for questions, trying to really understand and kind of get a vision of what their product is or what their concept is. And by asking those questions, that uncovers a lot of product details. More importantly, the product details that don't come top of mind and that often turn out to be roadblocks about midway through or toward the end of your development cycle because they're things that people just hadn't quite thought about. So what we try to do is ask all of those questions in the front end so we have fewer shockers and surprisings later on down the road. Another question that we often ask is, why are we building this, right? Well, first of all, I just love asking this question because sometimes it can kind of come across as a little bit of a wrench. But there's actually more to it than just a little bit of mischief that I get out of asking this question. What the answer to this question is going to tell you is going to uncover the assumed value. So someone has an idea of what their product is and how much value it brings. By asking, why are we building this? That's going to help to highlight the assumed value, get it out in the air, put it on paper, document, so it's not hiding in the back and we can all see it. The next question that we ask is, can we quantify this? This is obviously important because we're able to quantify the business value of what it is that we're building so that we don't take $1 million in dev resources and product resources and organizational resources and to build something. However, the payoff or the ROI of it is only going to be, the payoff of it is only going to be $250,000, right? It doesn't really make sense. So asking that question is very important. Next question is, what are our user pain points? This question is particularly helpful because it's going to validate that assumed value that I talked about before. So someone may have an idea of the value that that particular product is going to deliver, but it's not until we match it with what our user pain points that we know, okay, yeah, this is actually some value that we may be able to get. And if it doesn't match, that's an opportunity for us to step back, kind of pause, reevaluate, and figure out how we want to course correct if that's the right course of action. And last but not least, do you have feedback sessions or interviews? This question is especially important in product management because your end users are your North Star to everything, right? They're the folks that are buying your product. They're the folks that are adopting your product. And so by asking this question, you're able to validate that assumed value again, and you're able to validate the business value. So that question in and of itself kind of ties everything together and answers or informs the question of, are we building the right thing? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're building the right thing. So you've done your discovery and you're going to have some artifacts that are either going to come toward the end of that discovery or shortly after that discovery. The first of which is your architecture. What this slide is kind of here to highlight is the importance of us working together. And so on the left side, you'll see kind of some of the risk if we don't include product in these conversations, particularly with the architecture. It could be missing vital components that just your product manager is just on top of, and they know all the different things that we need to take account of. Whereas if we're working together, we can incorporate the entire product lifecycle with what we are building. Take Twitter, for example. You can imagine that Twitter, the first year, if you will, that it was launched, and the architecture of Twitter at that point in time to be very different than the architecture of Twitter today, even though the main content or the main goal of Twitter is more or less the same. Another thing that helps when we're doing it together is just being able to be lean and make sure that we're not over-engineering something and that we're engineering something based off of the product that we want to deliver relative to the corresponding milestone. The next artifact that I want to talk about is the roadmap, right? This is obviously very important. There's a lot of risk that if it's not going to have, both an engineering and a product mindset and perspective at the same table. However, when we do work together, we're able to prioritize together a roadmap that's going to decrease risk over time, where it's going to put your best bets first and make sure that, again, we're considering both perspectives when we are creating that roadmap. And personally, the thing that I like to do the most is make sure that that roadmap includes feedback cycles and iteration cycles. Oftentimes they can be, an afterthought. And so when it's time, so having designated time for the team to actually go in and iterate where they don't feel like it's something that has to be rushed, and having that, set alone time baked into your roadmap can be really helpful, not only for, us as product managers, but the entire team. A couple of other artifacts that I want to touch on are epics and our thin slices. So typically your thin slices are going to be vertical thin slices that kind of have a lot of the implementation details in terms of what we deliver sprint over sprint, where they kind of build up to the larger milestones that are oftentimes called epics. Again, you can see some of the risks that occur naturally when they're done alone, not including product and engineering. But again, together, we can prioritize our epics, for example, not only based off of the customer and tech, but obviously the product, the business, and the team. Every team is unique. And so being able to consider the team in addition to what we want to deliver, the value that we're expecting, really helps in being able to have epics that truly work and are going to have the impact that you're anticipating toward the end of your project. And last but not least, with thin slices are extremely important. I can do a whole talk on thin slices. I love them. But when we do them together, we can ensure that we're delivering incremental, actionable business value, sprint over sprint or every 2 sprints over sprints. So the question of how to fix a failed discovery, the answer to that is very simple. Don't fail at all, right? Because really and truly, when you don't have a technical product manager or a product manager in your discovery, you're not planning to have that person there, you're already failing. So choose not to fail, include that person within the discovery process, and you'll find that things will go a lot smoother. And this slide just kind of demonstrates some of the things that we can do together, right? Together, when you have something that's impactful, it's gone well, you find that there's good social impact, you find personal joy out of it, fulfillment, recognition, a lot of success. Obviously, the company is going to have earnings as well. So thank you so much for listening to me. Again, my name is Brittany Jones. I hope you've enjoyed my talk, and we look forward to working with you soon.